There's a guy I know named Craig, 38 years old, software developer, makes $105,000 a year. Rented a decent apartment for 9 years after college, while his coworkers bought houses one by one. Attended the housewarming parties. Heard the same sentence so many times it started to feel like economic law. You know, you're just throwing money away renting, right? At least with a mortgage, you're building equity. Craig bought a house in 2019, three-bedroom colonial in a suburb 40 minutes from his office. $420,000 purchase price. Conventional loan at 3.8% interest. 20% down, $84,000, which was the majority of his savings. Monthly payment, $1,980. He felt like he had finally made the adult financial decision his entire social circle had been waiting for him to make. Craig sold that house in 2024 for $510,000. Everyone told him he made $90,000. Craig actually lost money. Not on paper, in reality. And the gap between what everyone told him and what actually happened is the gap where the most expensive financial myth in American middle-class life lives permanently and rent-free. Here is what Craig actually spent between 2019 and 2024 on that house. Mortgage payments totaling $118,800. Of that, approximately $72,000 went to interest and was gone forever. Property taxes at 1.4% annually totaled roughly $29,400. Homeowners insurance cost $9,500 over 5 years. The roof needed repair in year 3, $11,200. HVAC replacement in year 4, $8,400. Routine maintenance, landscaping, appliances, painting, miscellaneous repairs averaged $4,200 per year, totaling $21,000. Closing costs on purchase were $8,800. Realtor commissions and closing costs on the sale were $34,200. Total cash out of Craig's pocket across 5 years, not counting the down payment itself, approximately $211,000. He sold for $90,000 more than he paid. His actual net position after all costs was approximately negative $121,000 compared to simply renting and investing. The house did not lose value. The house appreciated. Craig still lost money because appreciation and profitability are different calculations, and the real estate industry, the mortgage industry, and the cultural consensus around homeownership have spent decades conflating them so thoroughly that most Americans cannot separate them without help. Let me show you the comparison Craig never ran before he bought. In 2019, Craig had $84,000 in savings. He used it as a down payment. If he had instead invested that $84,000 in an S&P 500 index fund and continued renting a comparable apartment for $1,400 per month, instead of paying $1,980 in mortgage plus the carrying costs of ownership, two things happened simultaneously. First, the $84,000 invested in early 2019 through early 2024 grows to approximately $168,000 at historical market returns. The market roughly doubled in that 5-year period. Second, Craig invests the monthly difference between his rent and his true all-in ownership costs. The mortgage payment alone was $580 more than comparable rent. Property taxes added another $490 monthly. Insurance and average maintenance added another $470 monthly. His true ownership cost was approximately $2,940 per month compared to $1,400 in rent. The $1,540 monthly difference invested over 5 years at historical returns produces approximately $112,000 in additional wealth. Total renter and investor position after 5 years, approximately $280,000. Total homeowner position after the sale, approximately negative $121,000 net of all costs, including the recovered down payment. The difference is not subtle. Craig is $401,000 worse off than the renting alternative over 5 years of homeownership on a house that appreciating 21%, which everyone told him was a great return. The house appreciated. Craig did not profit. Those are different things, and almost nobody in Craig's life had the mathematical framework to show him why. Here is the historical context that explains how this myth became so durable it feels like physics. Between 1940 and 1970, homeownership was genuinely one of the best financial decisions most Americans could make. The GI Bill subsidized mortgages for returning veterans. Suburban expansion created massive demand. Construction costs were low. Property taxes were manageable. Mortgage interest was deductible. And the stock market, while growing, was less accessible to ordinary investors without employer-sponsored retirement accounts or low-cost index funds, which did not yet exist. In that environment, a house was legitimately one of the most accessible wealth-building vehicles available to the American middle class. That environment no longer exists. The mortgage interest deduction was substantially reduced by the 2017 tax law changes. The standard deduction now exceeds itemized deductions for the majority of homeowners, meaning the tax benefit most people believe they receive from homeownership does not actually materialize on their return. Property taxes in desirable metropolitan areas have risen dramatically relative to incomes. Maintenance costs on aging housing stock are substantial and rising. And crucially, low-cost index fund investing through tax-advantaged accounts is now universally accessible to anyone with a paycheck and a smartphone, eliminating the accessibility advantage housing once held over equity investing. The financial case for homeownership was constructed in a world where the alternative was a savings account paying 3%. The alternative today is an index fund returning 7 to 10% historically. The math changed. The cultural consensus did not. Step 1 toward thinking about this clearly requires separating the consumption value of homeownership from its investment value and evaluating them independently. Owning a home provides real non-financial value. Stability, control over your living environment, the ability to renovate and customize, community roots, school district access, pet ownership without landlord permission, the psychological security of not being subject to a landlord's decisions. These are genuine and meaningful. For many people in many life stages, they are worth paying for. But paying for consumption value and making a sound financial investment are different transactions. When you buy a car, you understand you are purchasing transportation, not making an investment. The car provides real value and costs real money with no expectation of profit. Home ownership for most people in most markets is closer to this model than to the investment model it is universally marketed as. Understanding which transaction you are actually making allows you to make it deliberately rather than under the illusion that you are simultaneously housing your family and building wealth through the same dollar. Step 2 is calculating the true price-to-rent ratio in your specific market before making a purchase decision. The price-to-rent ratio divides the purchase price of a home by the annual rent for a comparable property. A ratio below 15 historically suggests buying may make financial sense. A ratio between 15 and 20 is ambiguous and depends heavily on your specific circumstances and time horizon. A ratio above 20 suggests renting and investing the difference will likely outperform buying over most reasonable holding periods. In 2026, the price-to-rent ratio in San Francisco is approximately 40. In New York City, it is 35. In Boston, Seattle, Los Angeles, and Denver, it ranges from 25 to 32. In these markets, which contain a significant percentage of the American professional workforce, the mathematical case for renting and investing versus buying is not close. It is not a lifestyle preference question. It is a straightforward arithmetic question with a clear answer that the culture, the real estate industry, and the mortgage industry are collectively and continuously obscuring. In markets with ratios below 15, which exist primarily in the Midwest and parts of the South, the calculation genuinely shifts. Buying in Omaha or Columbus or Memphis at a price-to-rent ratio of 12 is a different financial decision than buying in Boston at 28. The universal cultural advice to buy rather than rent treats these markets as identical. They are not even close to identical. Step 3 is understanding the break-even timeline honestly before committing to a purchase. every house purchase has a break-even point where cumulative appreciation and equity building exceed cumulative transaction costs, carrying costs above comparable rent, and opportunity cost of the down payment. In high price to rent ratio markets, this break-even is typically 7 to 12 years. In lower ratio markets, it may be 4 to 6 years. The national average tenure in a owned home is approximately 8 years. In high-cost markets, it is closer to 6. The majority of people who buy houses in expensive markets do not hold them long enough to reach financial break-even. They sell, collect their appreciation, and feel like they made money because the number on the sale check is bigger than the number on the purchase contract. The carrying costs, the transaction costs, the opportunity cost of the down payment are not subtracted automatically. They require a calculation nobody prompted them to perform, and so the myth sustains itself, testimonial by testimonial, housewarming party by housewarming party, one financially comfortable feeling loss after another. Step 4 is the psychological work that makes any of the financial analysis actionable. The social pressure around homeownership is not trivial. It is embedded in how American adults signal stability, adulthood, community membership, and financial responsibility to each other. Renting past 35 generates a specific kind of social friction in most communities. Questions at family dinners, assumptions from colleagues, the implicit suggestion that you have not quite arrived at the life stage everyone else has reached. This pressure is real, and it drives financial decisions that make no mathematical sense in the markets where most of these conversations happen. The defense against this pressure is not a counter-argument to deploy at dinner parties. It is a concrete number, your specific price-to-rent ratio, your specific break-even timeline, your specific opportunity cost calculation on your specific down payment at your specific market returns. Numbers do not care about cultural consensus. Numbers do not care what your parents did. Numbers do not care that your coworker's house appreciated 30%, and she mentions it at every team meeting. Numbers describe what actually happened to your actual wealth, and the conversation becomes simpler when the number is in front of you rather than the feeling. Here is the structural reality that makes this problem larger than individual purchasing decisions. The American economy is organized around home ownership in ways that create enormous institutional pressure to buy, regardless of individual financial circumstances. The mortgage interest deduction, even reduced, subsidizes borrowing. The real estate industry, collecting 5% to 6% in commissions on every transaction, generates powerful incentives to encourage buying and selling. The mortgage industry earns more on larger loans held longer. Municipal governments depend on property tax revenue that rises with assessed values. The entire institutional architecture of American real estate is built to make buying feel inevitable and financially virtuous regardless of the specific market conditions, specific individual circumstances, or specific financial alternatives available to the person making the decision. None of these institutions are sitting across from you at the kitchen table running your actual numbers. They are running their numbers, which include a transaction, and then explaining to you in culturally resonant language why your numbers point toward the same conclusion. Craig is 38 years old. He is renting again. His coworkers have opinions about this. His parents have opinions about this. The sentence comes up at barbecues with the same reliable frequency it always did. You know you're just throwing money away renting, right? Craig now knows what to say. He knows his price-to-rent ratio. He knows his break-even calculation. He knows what his $84,000 down payment would be worth if it had stayed invested in 2019. He knows the difference between the sale price gain everyone celebrated and the net financial position nobody calculated. He is not throwing money away. He is paying for housing, which costs money, while keeping his wealth in assets that compound efficiently, which builds retirement security. These are different transactions, and treating them as the same transaction is the most expensive mistake in the American middle-class financial playbook. The house is not the investment. The house is the housing. Subscribe if this reframed something you have been told your entire adult life. Drop a comment with your city's price-to-rent ratio and whether the math surprised you when you ran it. And the next time someone tells you that you are throwing money away renting, ask them what their total carrying costs were last year, and watch what happens to the conversation.